Okay, so next up we're going to learn about JavaScript data types. So let's create a new JavaScript file. Let's call it 03 and type in data types.js. Let's also include it in our HTML. So I'm going to just comment out this, and underneath of our old script we're going to include the data types. Okay, so we have that included. So what is a data type? Well, JavaScript variables can hold many types of data, like numbers, strings, objects, and more. And there are two kinds actually. There are primitive data types and there are reference data types. So let's first of all take a look at, put in here, comment data types. So first one will be primitive data types, and then we'll learn about reference data types. Okay, so let's go up in primitive data types. I'm going to copy in a few of them. Okay, so there we have it. So primitive data types are stored directly in the location the variable accesses it, or stored in a stack. So what are the primitive data types? Well, Booleans, which can be true or false, null, which have no value. We already saw undefined, which is a declaration of a variable, but it hasn't been given a value. So it exists, but it's undefined. Then we have numbers. We already use numbers. They can be integers, floats, and so on. Strings, an array of a character or words, and symbols were included with ES6. So let's take a look at, actually let me go down here and type in another comment with primitives. I'm gonna comment is in with caps lock. So primitives, and let's start first of all with strings. So what is a string? Well, for example, if I would take a const and give it the name of name, and now I will assign it a string of Norbert. This is a string, and Meinhard, this is also a string. So strings are just characters of letters, and it also can be numbers between quotations. So if I would console log, so console.log, the variable of name, which will result in the string of Norbert Meinhard, and I want to check the type of this data, then before the string, before the variable, I would just type in type of. And the console will now tell me what kind of data it is. It is a string, as you can see. Now let's do the same thing with numbers. Let's type in here another comment, number or numbers. Now if I would define a const, let's call it age, and give this the value of 45, and now with console log age, this will result in a number 45. So if I would check the type of this type of data, it will prompt me that it is a string, because I assigned the age, the number 45, but between quotations. Now if I would take out the quotations and now check the type of, you can see it results in a number. Now let's see what a Boolean is. Let's type in here Booleans. There are two types of Booleans. Actually, let me put them up here. So Booleans are either true or false. So let's type in here const of is, let's say student. And now we will assign it a value of true. Okay, now if we check the data, console log, and console log is true, is student, it will prompt me with true. And if I would check the type of this data, so type of a student, will tell me that it is a Boolean. So let me take out this type. Let's replace it now with false. And now when we console log is student, it prompts me with the Boolean of false. Now let's take a look at null. So let's type in const, let's try knowledge, and assign it the value of null. And now if I would console log knowledge, you can see it tells me that it's null. And if I would check the type of knowledge, it will tell me that it's an object. Now, the null value is technically a primitive. The way object or null are primitives, this would typically mean that the type of null should also be null. However, this is not the case because of the particularity with the way JavaScript was first defined. In the first implementation of JavaScript, values were represented in two parts, a type tag and an actual value. There were 5 types of tag that could be used, and the tag for referencing an object was 0. The null value, however, was represented as the null pointer, which was 0 times 0 for most platforms. As a result of this similarity, null has the 0 type tag, which corresponds to an object. This is why when we check the type of knowledge, which is assigned the value null, it spits out an object, but it's actually 0. Now the last thing we're going to take a look at is undefined. And I'm just going to initiate here a let called test. Okay, close it up. Now let's console log this test. So test, and let's see what happens. Undefined. Because the variable is created, and as long as I don't assign it a value, it exists, but it has no value. We can also see when I hover over it, let test any. So it exists, but it's just undefined. So let's take a look at last thing is symbol. And let me just create here const. Let's call it symb. And now for the symbol, we actually have a method. So capital symbol and open and close parentheses. Now let's console log the symbol. .log, and I'm going to console log the constant symb. And let's see what happens. It prompts me with a symbol. And if I would check the type of symb, it will result in a symbol. Okay, so that's it for primitive data types. See you in the next one. Bye bye.